In previous years, when we meditated on the 4 establishments of mindfulness, I primarily focused on mindfulness of the body. So I was determined this year to find out something about mindfulness of feelings, mind, and phenomena. And I don't know about your experience, but when I started each of those topics, I would be kind of perplexed, like, how do you get into this? And then eventually, one of the meditations would open up and I'd be off and running. But it was an interesting experience. I was particularly interested in mindfulness of feelings because of its relationship, or the relationship between unpleasant feelings and reactivity. And so I spent most of my time looking at that. But I also enjoyed looking at mindfulness of mind and getting more familiar with the impermanence of the mind. And then mindfulness of phenomena. That's where I've parked myself since I'm in partial retreat now. And it's interesting because although I have studied mind and mental factors many times, and from the Sanskrit point of view, that's principally what mindfulness of phenomena is about, but even though I've studied that topic a number of times, I never did it in retreat. And so it's been very interesting to go over each of the mental factors, at least the virtuous and the non-virtuous mental factors, and really think about them in terms of their nature, really thinking about the characteristics, the definition, to be able to identify it in the mind. And then thinking about the causes that bring it about, the cooperative conditions, looking at sequential patterns, and then looking at how each of those mental factors operates in the mind, particularly non-virtuous mental factors and how they distort the thinking, or how the virtuous mental factors move the mind. And then thinking about the function of each of the mental factors, how it operates. Oh, I said that. And then looking at the results of each of the mental factors. And so I slowly reflected on these different mental factors, thinking about these 4 points, and then thinking about experiences, my own experiences of when they've been active in my mind. And about the time I was starting mindfulness of phenomena, I picked up this little book by Thich Nhat Hanh called Joyfully Together. Maybe some of you have read it. It's called The Art of Building a Harmonious Community. And it's a great little book for Sangha building. And it has some very practical stories and exercises in it. And it includes what you might call a sutra by Madhgalyana that he gave to a group of monks. It's called the Sutra on Measuring and Reflecting. And it includes, I found this quite interesting, it includes 17 mental attitudes that isolate us from others and also make it difficult for others to speak to us. And, when you're in retreat, the mind's a little more sensitive, so sometimes these things just hit the mark or go in deeply, and that was my experience. So what got my attention about these 17 attitudes is that they correlated so closely with the root and secondary afflictions. So Madhgalyana's talk was intended for a group of monks, but whether we're living in a Sangha community or we're living in a family or we're just spending time with friends or coworkers, this is interesting mostly because it's how we respond to feedback. And I've said in previous BBCs just how much feedback there is at the Abbey. And it's perfectly reasonable that we would have feedback at the Abbey because we are people who are really interested in taming our minds, subduing our minds, disciplining our minds, and creating the causes for full awakening. But everyone in society receives feedback, right? The kids get feedback from their parents and their teachers, and spouses give each other feedback. Remember those days? And friends give each other feedback. Politicians give and get a lot of feedback. Everyone is involved with receiving feedback. So what he has to say, I think, is applicable to just about anyone. Now, in my own experience, I do sincerely aspire when receiving feedback, just to put my hands together and say thank you. I don't manage that too often, but in fact, I asked Venerable Kunga yesterday, do you think I receive feedback pretty well? Something like that. And she gave me a whole list of what happens to me when I get feedback. She's very mindful. So that is a good friend. I found that helpful. Thank you very much. So what about you? How are you in receiving feedback? What is your response? How do you respond? It probably depends on many causes and conditions, right? Who's giving the feedback, how they're giving the feedback, when they're giving the feedback, what tone of voice they're using, etc. So there's lots of conditions that contribute to how we take in feedback. But Madhyalina begins by presenting a hypothetical situation. He says, "My friends, imagine that there is a monastic who requests other monastics saying, 'Friends, please converse with me. I want you to be considerate to me and to converse with me.' Why is it that one friend in the practice calls on other friends in the practice to talk to him or her? It's because that person fears that he is isolated in the Sangha and feels that no one in the Sangha wants to talk to him." We probably all had moments like that. "What are the qualities that make him difficult to speak with?" So then Madhyalina proceeds to give 17 examples of when it's difficult to speak with someone because of their mental attitude. So see if you can pick out some of the main non-virtuous mental factors in each of these situations. So he says, "A monastic is caught up in unwholesome desires and is controlled by unwholesome desires, such as attachment to fame, wealth, and pleasure." Pretty obvious, attachment. Maybe other things. There are probably several of them with each of these. A monastic praises him or herself and criticizes others. What do you think? Pride, arrogance. A monastic is easily angered. A monastic is angry and holds a grudge. And resentment. Yeah. A monastic is angry, holds a grudge, and becomes bad-tempered. That doesn't happen here, but maybe somewhere in some monastery. So what's added there? Maybe belligerence? Spite. Spite really is about speaking, isn't it? Yeah, that's coming. So maybe belligerence. A monastic is angry, holds a grudge, and speaks in a bad-tempered way. Spite. A monastic condemns his friend in the practice who has corrected him. What's that? Ignorance. Concealment could be. Mm-hmm. Disrespect is not specifically identified as a mental factor, but it is, and maybe some cruelty in there. A monastic scorns his friend in the practice who has corrected him. Maybe harmfulness. A monastic corrects in turn his friend in the practice who has corrected him. That never happens here. Spite, maybe non-integrity. A monastic questions in return his friend in the practice who has corrected him. Maybe in consideration for others. A monastic evades the subject and asks irrelevant questions of the one who has corrected him. I think that's concealment. You think they're all five concealment? Uh-huh. A monastic does not explain his behavior satisfactorily to the one who has corrected him. Maybe unconscientiousness. A monastic is unrefined and ill-willed. So unrefined here, I think, means distracted, the way Thich Nhat Hanh. He gives more commentary to each one of these. Very interesting to read. And then ill will is someone who really has no intention of correcting their behavior. A monastic is jealous and greedy. A monastic is scheming and deceitful. A monastic is stubborn and arrogant. And a monastic is attached to worldly life and finds it difficult to let go. So maybe in consideration for others, self-centeredness, attachment. Yeah. Well, I think it's fair to say that we all value connection, harmony, and good communication with the people we live with and spend time with. And so to achieve that, we're advised to examine our minds constantly, right? That's what Geshe Tabke was talking about on Thursday. We need to become skilled at lessening our afflictions, developing our good qualities, And as Geshe Topke said, we need to become our own protector. At the same time, we also need to rely on others' wisdom and their compassion to help us see ourselves, because we have blind spots. And so we do need to rely on each other in that way. We can't always see ourselves clearly. So these 17 mental attitudes isolate us from our Sangha brothers and sisters, and make it difficult for others to speak to us. So it's important to check up which ones. I found myself in a number of them. So they also instruct us and show us when others show us our mistakes, and these lead others to losing confidence in us. They don't trust us. However, by cultivating mindfulness and humility, we learn to welcome others' advice to us, to support us, to guide us, to help us learn, especially our teachers. So following that, Madhgalyana spoke of 17 virtuous qualities, which were the exact opposite of what we've just mentioned. And these caused the Sangha to respect and love our Dharma friends more and more each day, allowing others to teach us, show us our faults when necessary, and generating greater confidence in us. So a monastic is not caught up in unwholesome desire, non-attachment. A monastic who does not praise himself or criticize others, humility. A monastic who is not controlled by anger, non-hatred, etc. So he concludes by saying, "My friends, these are the virtuous qualities that make a monastic someone who others can easily approach and talk to." 17 qualities make it difficult for others to approach and talk to us, and 17 qualities make it easier for them to approach us. So Madhgalyana advises the monastics to continue looking deeply in their minds to see where we might have some of these or where they might arise, what conditions bring them about, that sort of thing, until we have completely transformed them. And so the Sangha is like a mirror for us. Our family is like a mirror for us. Our friends and our co-workers can be like a mirror for us. And of course, not all feedback is wise, so we also have to use our own discriminating wisdom to check up to see if what people are offering to us makes sense and is according with the Dharma. But then with humility, we can make use of those mirrors to more quickly progress along the path.